Hello. In theory, people can now be watching us. I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Jerome. I stuck an article up on the Cardiff Centre for Community Journalism MOOC this week. So we're in week 2 of the e-learning MOOC there, and my research work is in audiences, hyperlocal community audiences, and I've done ethnographic work in Wolverhampton area, and now I'm about to start in Birmingham, a new kind of 1-year engagement there, and I was interested in doing kind of an Ask Me Anything kind of thing here, but hopefully keeping it to Ask Me Anything that I can conceivably answer from my work. I'll bat anything away that I can't. But also talking to hyperlocal people and practitioners about what they know about their audiences, or think they know about their audiences, or would like to know more, given that I'm about to kind of dive into some more work. Maybe we could just do some quick introductions. Going along the bottom, I think, Dan, you said you had to shoot off at some point. Maybe if you could say hello and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'll probably be able to stick around for 20 or 30 minutes, but I'm Dan Freund from New Hampshire, USA.
I seem to have another Hangout coming in.
Okay. Well, another invite. That's probably a previous invite. To be fair, I had problems. So sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've really been interested in throughout my career and experimentation with especially video content, serving a very localized audience here in New Hampshire, partly because I was trying to figure out what I was doing and how best to feed information and diversionary entertainment to my audience, but also because every 4 years the world seems to pay attention to this region because of the American presidential cycle, which is starting to pick up again now. And looking at that, I've seen how my style has changed from 2008 when I went out with a film crew to 2012 when I went out with just a camera myself, holding the camera, like this, and pointing it back at myself, holding conversations. And now what I seem to be doing, which is much more leaving the camera at home and using my iPhone to capture and share short little clips.
Have you invested in a selfie stick to do? Because I remember before you were doing, when we talked about video in Hyperlocal, you were showing how you put yourself in the frame to kind of put interviewees at ease in that respect.
As I was doing that, I would hold the camera just at arm's length and point it back at myself. Not really a selfie stick per se, but my workflow now consists primarily of a GoPro and an iPhone, and I do all of my editing right on my iPhone because it's quick, it's near real time, and I don't have to go back and shuffle all of my content through a computer before getting it out and online.
Okay.
Dan, do you use the GoPro app for that, or are you doing it in iMovie on the iPhone?
I use the GoPro app to transfer files from the GoPro to the iPhone. I can't use ProRes. I don't have all the GoPro functions if I want to be able to use that workflow. So I'm limited in that regard. But I'm using iMovie on the iPhone, and when I'm capturing on the iPhone, I'm using Hyperlapse app, which is an app from Instagram that was kind of touted as a way of stabilizing time-lapse video. And it defaults to a 6x time frame once you capture it, but you can slide that down to 1x time, and it has an incredible effect of stabilizing footage. The Verge, an online magazine, did a comparison between a C100 on a Steadicam, about a $10,000 Steadicam rig, compared to someone running with an iPhone using hyperlapse, and under the right lighting conditions, you couldn't even tell the difference, which was amazing if you're looking for that kind of stabilization in the footage that you capture, and you have an iPhone. I don't think there is an equivalent yet for Android, unfortunately.
Okay.
Thanks.
So if we're thinking about audiences, so you're out kind of video. How do you get a sense of how people are watching that or how people are using it? If we think in those terms. So partly, you know, the dull thing of stats, but hopefully the exciting thing of feedback as well.
Well, my distribution strategy has really it's changed over the past few months, and I'm primarily using Instagram as my connection point because I find the most engagement and interaction on Instagram. And I'm taking those same videos that I'm posting to Instagram and posting them to Facebook, as well as, you know, native videos to Facebook, because Facebook treats those with a higher preference than third-party video. But I'm also using a service called Wistia, which is a Boston-based, Cambridge-based company that offers professional-level video hosting. And the great thing about what Wistia does is that they give me a heat map and some analytics that I don't have through YouTube or even through Vimeo. And that allows me to see where people are watching. So when I started my coverage of the New Hampshire primary process a month or two ago with an activist campaign that was kicking off a 50-mile walk from the seacoast to the state capitol. And I captured that with my GoPro. I captured, and I'll dig up the link before I go. I captured that with my GoPro and my iPhone, and I used the GoPro as my interview camera. I used my iPhone as my secondary B-roll camera, and then bringing those together, I was able to create something with kind of that standard B-roll over interview footage just using my iPhone. And I was there for maybe 35 minutes, and I was able to edit that within an hour and a half while I was sitting on the floor playing with my kids.
Yeah.
Which, you know, looking back on that afterwards, I thought, wow, this is fantastic that I can kind of, because I'm so easily distracted, but I can sit there and I can do multiple things at once, and I don't have to be sitting at a computer in order to tell the story.
Is this Wistia, W-I-S-T-E-A?
W-I-S-T-I-A.
I-A, thank you.
Whilst we're getting down to hard facts, Dan, have you got a web URL you want to share? Because what we have is the showcase thing that pops up on the right where you can put links in, things like that.
I have my personal site, which I've been kind of reshifting for my job search, but I'll just put that in.
Okay.
And I'll find this video as well so that you can see the example of what I'm talking about. And maybe if I can share my screen and some of you click to watch this, I can show you the analytics as they happen in real time. So I'm going to share this video.
We can do that briefly so that we can then go on to talk to James as well in a second.
And so, if you
Dan,
click
I don't know your work, but have you always led with video, or is it something you've moved to because you think that's where the audience is?
It's been something that I've been tinkering with for the past 10 years, and I've led with that because it fits my personality, and that's the type of content that I want to consume, that's easiest for me to consume, and so it's easiest for me to think in terms of using video as the conduit for conveying thoughts, ideas, information. I may not be able to see how to share my screen so that you can see it, but if any of you have clicked on that, I don't think any of you have, but what I see is where, and the value again of Wistia is that I can see where people are watching, where they're trailing off, more importantly. So if I have a video that I think is really great, but it's a little bit long, or there's a section where people tend to trail off, I can see that and make a change, especially if it's for some kind of critical messaging that you really want to get the idea across, and it doesn't really matter how you do that. If you can swallow your pride and make adjustments, you can be more effective in reaching your audience and understanding your audience.
I guess it's a little similar to the trail off that you can see on YouTube video stats after the event, you know, where you see kind of 80% of people are watching the first minute, but by the last hour of your video or whatever, everybody's got bored.
Right. Correct, yeah.
Right. Okay, James, and well, James and Steph, I guess, but James, as you've got your mic on, if you want to just say briefly who you are and maybe tell us a bit about your audience and kind of what you do, where you do it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. My name's James Clark. I'm one half of the wv11.co.uk team. The other half is Steph, who's also down there, but she's muted because I know she's at work at the moment. Yeah. We run a hyperlocal website which covers Wentzfield, which is an area of Wolverhampton in England. We've been running the site since June 2009 now. We run a WordPress-based website. We also have a Facebook page, Twitter, various other profiles, but most of our kind of engagement with audience happens on the Facebook page. It's been something that we've spent a lot of time really working on, and in the last couple of years particularly, the Facebook page has kind of taken over from the website, certainly in terms of the traffic we get and the engagement we get. So we probably put more effort into the Facebook page than the actual website itself these days. In terms of the audience, it's locally based, obviously. It's kind of community based in that we're focusing on community news and events, things that are happening in people's communities and neighbourhoods. We don't do any kind of advertising. We do the odd bit of supporting local businesses, but it's pretty much kind of community based, so that's where our focus is. It's led to us over the last 5 years becoming heavily involved within the community in different community groups. So we've kind of ended up with a kind of self-fulfilling circle where the stuff that we were covering initially just with snippets of news, we're now part of the people who are making some of that news, which means we get a lot more information and know more about what's actually going on in the local community. We're the go-to place for lost dogs. We're the go-to place for people who want to know when they hear a police helicopter what it's doing and why it's there. Road accidents, road closures. Often people will now report information to us before going anywhere else to look for it. So we're not replacing the local news sources such as radio and newspapers, but I think sometimes people come to us first to see whether there's what the word on the street is, as it were.
Okay, and it was interesting because somebody on the MOOC chat about kind of around the thing that I posted in a few comments, and people were kind of talking about the role of the types of comments that people make and how those kind of help build up stories and those kind of things. I wonder if you could kind of tell us a bit more about those. I mean, I could, but let's hear it from the horse's mouth.
You mean in terms of how people sending us content or comments are informing stories?
And what kind of things they do? Maybe some examples and maybe some examples of the kind of things they do and the function that they have.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we have all kinds of things. I mean, people will often contact us. We'll have, prime example, we'll have someone contact us say, "I'm looking to move into the area. I'm looking for a house to rent." So we can share that kind of post. And other people will then recommend properties that are available to rent, places that are nice to live, things like that. We have appeals relating to crime. We have quite a lot of those. Not that there's tons of crime, but if somebody has a bike stolen or a house broken into, we might get a message saying, look, can you warn people my house was broken into on this address, or my bike was stolen from this address, to give people an idea of where potentially places are being targeted. We've had appeals where we've been able to help members of the community. A couple of years ago there was a house fire where a woman lost pretty much everything she owned. We were able to put an appeal out online very quickly via our social media outlets and the website, asking for donations, and within, I think it was 48 hours, we had 18 bin bags full of clothes and toys donated for this lady and her kids. So we're able to mobilise a community that already exists, but we can mobilise them quite quickly online and kind of bring them together quite quickly. And I think we have quite a tight-knit community anyway, but we've created, inadvertently, because there wasn't really any intention to do it, we've created a kind of platform online that allows them to come together around things, be it an appeal for someone who's in trouble, be it a community fun day that we can promote and tell people it's happening, all those kind of things. We've got a platform to kind of bring people together and inform them about something quite quickly. And so when the occasion has risen, we've been able to mobilise actual people on the ground to do things as well, not just get behind an online petition against a planning application or something of that type.
And the interesting thing that one of the things that I kind of picked up in my article, so it was kind of exploratory and kind of posing questions as much as anything, was that I don't think in that explanation you used the word journalism or journalist or anything like that, which is a kind of a current thing that the work that people like yourselves do is often viewed externally as journalism or within that context. But the thing I'm increasingly seeing is that it has kind of different value, and so the word that the kind of ways we talk about it is in terms of everyday and banal, and the contextual and those kind of things. So it's not always politicised, but it's often just as important to those people living in the community to have those kind of platforms, have those kind of conversations. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, we don't consider ourselves journalists of any shape or form. We have no formal training. We're not trying to be a local newspaper at the end of the day. We're just trying to be active members of the community. I think the term active citizen is bandied around, or creative citizen even,
yes.
And that's definitely more how I see myself, and I'm pretty sure Steph sees herself. We're not looking to do, as I say, what journalists do. By the nature of sharing information and news, yes, there's an element where people kind of associate that with that, but that's not what we're aiming to do. And I think some sites, hyperlocal sites, do have a more kind of journalistic outlook, and they want to be a news source. We're really more of an engagement source, I would say. It's not just about news, it's actually about getting people involved where we can, or at least telling them, here's something you can get involved in, should you wish. I don't know if Steph wants to come in. I think she's unmuted her mic.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with everything you've just said there. I don't see myself as a journalist. I wouldn't want to see myself as a journalist, and I haven't got enough time to put in the effort to create stories that journalists would. But when we can do really simple things, just find out information, because we've got the WV11 platform that people will listen to, then if that's journalism, then so be it. So, for instance, this morning we've had a road closed round by where we live. All the signs at the end of the road say we'll be closed for 3 weeks. 5 weeks later, it's still closed, and because we've got WV11, we were able to approach Severn Trent Water and say, look, what's going on? We got an answer straight away, where maybe someone else might have struggled a little bit or had to wait a little bit longer for a reply, but because we said, look, we just want to share this with our community so people know to avoid the area, they gave us the information. Is that journalism? I don't think so, because anyone could have asked that question. We just happen to have a platform to ask the question from.
And I think the difference is that kind of using the platform and it being immediate and topical means that information gets out quicker than any traditional newspaper would get. Definitely quicker than they get it out in print, but probably quicker than they get it out online as well, when they've got those online platforms as well. It's interesting you talk about not seeing yourself as a journalist partly because you don't have the time or the resources. And do kind of readers who are participating sometimes provide that. So I'm thinking of the kind of stories that you've had run in the past, where all you're able to lead with, because it's all you've got, is there has been an accident on so-and-so road, and then the comments that unfold underneath it kind of contextualise it, saying, yes, that was my son or whatever, or something like that. And there's an element of you having to watch that and kind of mediate that, but often the story unfolds through the readers, and then issues of kind of who can be trusted and who can't, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. Often our stories, people come to us with the information. It's not like we're journalists who are sat there who get a tip off and then go and investigate. Often we'll be able to kind of piece together a picture of what's happening somewhere, be it an accident, or we've had 2 or 3 arsons in the last 4 months locally, which have raised a lot of discussion online. Because obviously it's a very visible thing, an arson. When a building's on fire, people can see it, they can hear about it, and so we do have anything happens, we'll get a number of reports coming from varying different people. Now, some of the people who regularly send us information, for example, there's one chap who's a local photographer. He often sends us photos. If something happens, he goes and takes photos of it. So we know that he's taking photos of something on the scene, and he's a trusted source, for want of a better term. Likewise, we'll sometimes get members of the press give us information as well. We have a guy who does a lot of travel reports on the local radio stations, and if there's anything in our patch, he often tells us, and that's quite, in a way, that's maybe an unusual relationship with someone from the traditional media, because a lot of them seem quite wary of what we're doing and want to keep us separate from what they're doing, whereas he actively gives us information. So yeah, you do have to, you have to be careful where the information is coming from and how trustworthy it is. But certainly, if we suddenly have 10 messages saying there's an accident on this street or there's a fire here, we can then go to the official sources that we do have links with, such as the police, ambulance, fire, city council, whoever it might be, and ask them for some clarification, kind of confirmed information. So I think that enables us to quite quickly respond to things. But as Steph said, we're not journalists, so that's providing we're not doing something else. One of the arsons that happened recently, it was literally a few hundred yards from our house, but we were the other side of Wolverhampton doing something when our phone started going mad. So we're not in the same position where we can kind of drop everything and go and cover a story.
But interestingly, from as part of it, even from a distance, you were still able to kind of share messages like, yes, this is happening, but please try and keep the area clear for emergency services, and you were able to field and have the platform for photos and things like that.
I think that's the difference as well. Then you just hit the nail on the head a little bit. Journalists want to share the story. We want to share information. So we share information about keeping the area clear for the emergency services. After the fact, the fire that you're talking about right now, we were able to use our platform to galvanise the community a little bit. So the school was closed the day after, but it was a primary school and all the parents were a little bit up in the air. So we managed to open up one of the local community centres and put a day on and give the information out to say that the community centre was open specifically for entertainment for the children displaced by the fire. So we're not there to sensationalise or to sell advertising or to write a story as much as inform, and I think there is a difference.
Has anyone else got anything they'd like to add? Yeah, Will, go for it. Oh, we can't hear you.
I agree very much with Steph's points. A lot of the people we talk about local, which is my company, and which I run with Sarah, and I also run a website, kingscrossenvironment.com. A lot of the people we talk to have come to this form of local information distribution as a reaction to the increasingly sensationalist coverage of local journalists who are a bit desperate one way or another. It's not the journalists' fault themselves, it's the environment within which they're forced to work. And certainly in Islington, we have a good paper, but it does tend to have an if it bleeds, it leads approach to the front page. And King's Cross is a very troubled area, and no one else was actually talking about it with a positive voice. And we found it a niche doing that, but also tackling the day-to-day but very gritty and difficult urban issues, littering, dog fouling, things that fall beneath the news radar, or increasingly these days, planning applications in an area that's being regenerated very, very heavily. The built environment's been transformed beyond all recognition in the last 10 years, and every one of those has had to have a planning application. So we've done a lot of work on planning, which the local papers have never covered unless it's a really, really big issue. But on that planning, it just is a lead into something I wanted to raise, and a recent experience with Facebook. We run a Facebook page for King's Cross, King's Cross UK. I got in very quickly when those distinctive URLs came in, and I got there before Network Rail, who run the train station, and who at that point didn't know what Facebook was, I think. And King's Cross UK page, we feed with, I use RSS Graffiti to bring in the feeds from 5 or 6 little local outlets, sites of different sorts, from the local councillors, the schools, churches, that sort of thing, as well as the King's Cross environment stuff. But we had a big planning issue. And we've got about how many followers have we got on that now? We've got about 7,000 likes, and which isn't that many, but we have over 250,000 check-ins because we have a train station there, and people tend to check in on the way through. And we had a big issue, a big planning issue on St Pancras Station, the very famous neo-Gothic building there. And I thought, how do I reach the audience of people who travel through the area? Well, let's see what I can do with the Facebook page. Normally, I reach about 150 to 300 people on the Facebook page with each run-of-the-mill post about a planning issue. And I thought, well, Facebook was prompting me to buy an advert, promote a post, so I thought, well, I'll promote a post. And I took their first suggestion, which was to put £13 in, which seemed an affordable amount of money to me. I wrote a specific post for it, a specific photo, and put my £13 in and sat back to see what would happen. And we reached 10,000 people through that Facebook advert, which in many senses was Facebook, me buying back from Facebook the organic reach I might have had originally before they took it all away, which was quite frustrating. But I did find it quite a dramatic way to reach a much bigger audience, literally an order of magnitude bigger than I would have done before. And also, we got engagement, about 300 people actually engaged or clicked on the post. And it maybe led to a few comments going into the planning process. But increasingly, if you look at newspaper statistics, the traffic comes basically from Google and from Facebook. Twitter doesn't even feature, is barely statistically significant, even though that's what the chattering political classes use. And I just wondered what people's experiences were of relative audience sizes coming from those different traffic sources.
I don't know whether you've seen as well the big announcement from Facebook, in fact about an hour ago, for news companies, having negotiations with them as to whether they'll take the content within Facebook, and some shenanigans going on there. But I'll dig it out. I'll post it as a link in a minute, because that will be quite a game changer if that goes ahead, I think.
Just the okay. No, I thought I found it. No, maybe
so
not.
I suppose my question is so Steph and James, you said most of your you spend more time on Facebook almost than on the site now. In my case, I still 90% of my stuff originates on the blog and goes through RSS Graffiti into Facebook. But I do very little tending of the Facebook garden. But I'm aware that's where a lot of people are. What are our experiences of different audiences?
The only thing I'll add, just to start off that, is from my work. Well, I mean, I soon kind of focused on Facebook rather than Twitter, and part of it was because there was just more discussion and more going on Facebook, but partly because I was interested in, the civic engagement and residents, and it seemed to be that Facebook was for residents, and in case of WV11, and Twitter largely was more leaning towards peer-to-peer professionals, organisations, councillors, things like that. The more professional peer-to-peer end of it. Is that a fair comment, James, Steph? Does that sound right? Or?
I'm going to jump in and answer first, James. Sorry, just because I have to leave in 2-3 minutes to host a social friend session of my own on Skype. So bear with me a second. I'll agree entirely with what you say there, Jez. Our primary audience is on Facebook, and where we network with other people that run sites like us, and the local partners is definitely on Twitter, that conversation. So they're very two different platforms with different conversations. However, every post that we put up on our website gets linked to Facebook and get links to Twitter, and we do get a varying degree of engagement. We do get links through Twitter, just not as much as Facebook. And Facebook content we find has a greater reach when it's content that has been created within Facebook, not that links outside of Facebook, and that is something Facebook gain, quite frankly, to try and keep you within their ecosystem. I follow the reach on our page purely because of what I do for a living, and so I need to be able to talk to people about how these things work. But for my community, I don't even bother. And I know that sounds daft, because we know when something important's happening, our community picks up on it and reshares it and reshares it and reshares it, so we don't have to worry about the reach. Some posts, we've got 7,376 fans on our Facebook page at the moment. And I'm just looking at the page now. So the post I put up this morning about the road closure has reached 1,879 people, according to the stats I'm looking at here. Yet one of the posts that we put up last week about one of the arson attacks reached over 10,000 people. So it depends on what is of interest to the community as to how our reach, how Facebook and the audience reacts to that. The good news stuff tends to promote a really nice reaction, so we get a really nice positive. So we've shared photographs of a community fun day that we helped arrange this weekend, and we've had some really nice feedback from the photographs of that. The bad news stuff, you tend to just get lots more shares on that, because it's people sharing it within their networks, not just responding to it on the site. So the type of stories that you share create a different response.
I think I'd echo that. I think it's interesting that looking at our web stats as well, we get more traffic, as Will said. It's Google and Facebook, and the Twitter traffic is insignificant, which on the one hand is strange, because for me, Twitter has become one big news feed, and I follow more sites and blogs and things than I do people. So you would have thought that would be generating more traffic. Whether it's to do with the demographics of the area, I mean, our local council has a Facebook page which they started, I think, 2 years after it is Wolverhampton City Council. I think they started their council page 2 years after Twitter. The council page on Facebook currently has 35,000 followers, and their Twitter account has significantly less than that. I'm just looking to see what it is exactly. So whether, to a certain degree, there's an element of different places, different areas, for whatever the reason, have adopted different networks as their kind of favoured way of finding information. Yes, their council Facebook page, it's called Wolverhampton Today, the Facebook page. It has 35,000 followers. Their Twitter account, which started 2 years before that, has just under 10,000 followers. So Facebook is 3 times more popular, or 3.5 times more popular on the council front in Wolverhampton than Twitter, and that certainly, I would say, is probably echoed with our audience as well.
The interesting thing about that Wolverhampton Today page is that they don't really frame it as being a council thing, and of those hundreds of thousands or whatever followers, a lot of people might not be aware that it's a council thing because it doesn't have that kind of branding, despite the fact all the stories are kind of council, PR type stories, I think, generally speaking, or they're sharing good things that are happening in the city. What was I going to say about Twitter? Okay.
Well, while you're just catching yourself up with that one, it's interesting you say that about the council's Facebook page. With lots of people, you are assuming that lots of people don't think it's the council, whereas when we were doing our page, and still now at times, people assume we are the council.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure if you can really make that statement stand up, that they don't know the council, when there's lots of assumption that whenever anything's happening of a civic nature, it possibly is the authority.
Yeah, no, well, we did work on the, so actually this is my quick plug. So James mentioned earlier Creative Citizens. I work on a research project called Creative Citizens. Well, if you go to creativecitizens.co.uk, you can find out more there. But one of the things we did there was we did a focus group with people who weren't aware of a hyperlocal website in Cannock called Connect Cannock, and we showed them, like 8 people, the front page and said, what is this and what do you think you can do here, without giving them any more context. And it being a news organisation or something to do with a council or an organisation, etc., etc. And then when we kind of almost, showed them a photo of the guy who runs it and said that this person is a citizen of Cannock and does it with his partner, they they were kind of relatively surprised because of the level of professionalism in what it looked like and how it was run. So it's interesting, kind of the expectations people make, and the expectations people make of people like you, Stephen James, when you're running it. You know, expectations like if I send you a story, you'll be able to kind of share it at any point in the day, that kind of thing, because you won't be working or whatever. I don't know if anybody else has.
Yeah, I get a bit of that. I'm very brusque with PRs though, and they quickly learn to go away. And occasionally we're busy. You know, we've had 2 children in the last 2.5 years, and it's been a very busy time. So the amount of time I've had to post stories and things people send me about, you know, book launches or residence meetings has been limited, and some have had to slip. And occasionally I've got other people who can back me up, but not all the time, especially if all of us are working. So it is tricky. But there is this interesting issue about the democratic effect of losing the division between editorial and PR in council-owned outlets. Eric Pickles has been very strong on council newspapers, the sort of town hall pravdas, as he memorably called them. But they still have Facebook pages, and that's where the audience is. You know, Eric's fighting the battle of 1980s, really, in that respect. So, and as more services are devolved by the current administration, probably by Labour administration as well, there's this really tricky issue about local accountability at a time when the number of editorial journalists at local papers is diminishing quite sharply. So, who is going to hold these hundreds of millions of pounds of newly devolved services to account? And where are the independent media voices to do that, you know, for an audience? Well, on that slightly gloomy note, I'm going to have to drop out to get to my thing, but thank you very much, Jez, for convening. It's very helpful.
Okay, excellent. Thank you all. See you. Guy, I don't know if you want to say hello. I'm Guy, and this is what I do, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Or...
Is my microphone working?
Yeah, perfect.
Hello, I'm Guy. I'm in Southampton, and I run 2 hyperlocal websites. The first one since 2005. Called Apartment Info. Shall I type that in the thing? Group chat?
Yeah. If you put it in the chat, I'll put it in the showcase thing, because they're 2 separate things.
What was the question?
Well, just I suppose I'd be interested to hear whether the talk of audiences that we've had resonates with you, or whether you have slightly different experiences, or.
Well, I think I sort of came quite late, really, to social media, really. So my Facebook page doesn't really have many likes at the moment, so less than 1,000. Twitter's a bit more than that. But since I sort of started getting into those, certainly my traffic's increased heavily, and I use it really to try and get clicks back through to the sites, I suppose. Although the Facebook page is just starting to generate a bit of a life of its own, if you like, and people are starting to actually talk to each other, which is quite interesting. And I would say that I'm not so interested now in trying to get more likes on Facebook, just because, as people have been saying, you know, the way the whole thing's throttled, really. Even when you get loads of likes, you can't actually reach those people anyway. But I have used sponsored posts a few times, both for my own, both as a method of marketing my sites, I suppose, to try and reach a greater audience, because I think the targeting is quite good with Facebook. You can target by city, so I can target by city and by age, and by sex and by interest. So it is quite a good way to reach new people. So I've sponsored a few posts for the websites and also for other organisations that I do social media for. It's a good way to. But I understand with Twitter as well that you can you can now target by postcode, which is something that I haven't tried. Sponsored posts on Twitter, but something that I'm certainly may well look at. You know.
Mm. And it's interesting because it was part of the motivation in looking at sponsored posts, because you have a different model of sustainability and finance in what you do. Do you do it slightly differently?
Sorry, different.
I mean, it's a slightly facetious question, because I know your site you carry media advertising.
Yeah, well, it's a sort of commercial enterprise as far as that you know, the only income it generates is through advertising, really, and through selling the odd T-shirt. So that's how it pays for a little bit of my time to run it, really. So I'm interested in, among other things, building up the audience, which makes a better proposition for advertisers.
Okay, that's great.
So I'm interested in in ways of doing it. I'm also interested in sort of community journalism and exploring issues which you said may well go under the radar of the local media here, because and covering stuff in much more depth that they just wouldn't be interested in,
And when you're covering stuff in depth, does that sometimes feel like it's motivated or kind of in response to the interests of your audience? Do they say, "Oh, we want more of this kind of stuff"? Or
sometimes I think it's, to me personally, it can be a little bit depressing in terms of what gets the interest. So, a photograph of crocuses in spring, denoting the start of spring, for example, can get a heck of a lot of interest, whereas a report that I might spend the best part of the day going to a meeting, writing it up, checking stuff out, writing a fairly detailed report may get a lot less, may well get a lot less interest. So to that extent, it's, I suppose, a labour of love, because the income the sites generate doesn't cover all the time that I do put in. But I think it's important that those kinds of things are covered for democracy, I suppose, really, and so that people know what's happening in the local community.
Yeah, but I suppose also the crocus photos are the kind of things that draw people in and keep them for the other stuff, like the more investigative.
Sure. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I like sunny crocuses by the river as well. But but it's just when you look at the statistics sometimes, Yeah.
But James, you've got similar things like your Mother's Day. Is it Mom or Mum post that got hundreds of responses, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean one of the, and we even did this last night. One of the most popular discussion topics is what's your favourite Chinese takeaway or favourite curry house in the area. That always gets way more engagement than anything about a council consultation on cuts to the neighbourhood warden surface or anything like that. And I think that's partly the nature of social media. A lot of people use it for social and therefore more fun means. That, and I think also anyone, it's easy to have an informed opinion on your favourite takeaway in the area, because you don't have to be an expert, you just have to use takeaways. And there are people who maybe feel, even if they have a strong view on a hard or serious topic such as a council consultation, that posting their thoughts about it on social media isn't necessarily the first thing they want to do, because there's that element of will I be attacked, will I be criticised, will I make myself look stupid? So getting people to engage around those more serious topics can be hard, and I think it's something that local authorities struggle with massively. I was in a meeting recently with Wolverhampton City Council where we were discussing a draft plan for the city centre, and the city centre is probably one of the most controversial topics in the city in terms of the state that the city centre is in, empty shops, poor parking, etc., etc. And the council have run a 3-month consultation on this draft area plan, which has a nice glossy brochure with what they expect or what they envisage could be built in the city centre. And this is a plan that will serve as a kind of document until 2026. And after I'd kind of had this presentation from the planning department about the plan, I asked them how many people had formally responded to the consultation in 3 months, and they'd had 50 formal consultations in 3 months, and they thought that was a good figure and worthwhile the time and effort and cost of running the consultation. The population of Wolverhampton is 250,000, and they had 50 formal responses. I was astounded at how few that was, but it just goes to show it's not an easy thing to get people to talk about the serious topics on the internet. I think it's not necessarily as easy as people maybe assume it might be.
No, and I think I think people often talk about wanting to have access to the knowledge without then necessarily accessing the knowledge. So I'm thinking about, for example, the great work you did, and that people will be doing across the country in Hyperlocal around the elections. So was it last year when it was the local elections and you did your questionnaires for all the candidates, and some of them responded, and there was a lot of discussion about democratic right to this knowledge, etc., etc., and people talking about that in those terms. But then when I looked at the amount of click-throughs, they didn't seem to reflect people actually then going to read the responses. Is that a fair comment again? I mean,
yeah, definitely. I mean, we've run candidate questions for 2 or 3 years running now. We're doing it again this year because we think it's important, and as people who are involved in the community, these people are going to represent us. So we always try and give them the opportunity to basically kind of state their case before they're elected. And often, my personal frustration is that these candidates seemingly come out of nowhere, expect you to vote for them, and you have no idea what they've done previously or who they are. So we encourage them to not only say what they plan to do should they get elected, but give us a bit of an idea of what they have been doing. But again, even with 5 or 6 questions in, it's a relatively long article compared to a one-line update about a road being closed on Facebook. And there's all the stats point to the fact that the longer the article, the less people read it, basically. So I think stuff like that, you have to put it out there in the hope that you might not get lots of numbers, lots of eyeballs on it, but perhaps that content will make a difference to the fewer eyeballs that were really interested in that.
I mean, the other thing is I think I was probably talking about the click-throughs from Facebook. What that doesn't reflect is all the people that will just be Googling information about the local candidates, that will be finding them on Google through your blog without using Facebook as a platform, which is, I guess, the role that the blog performs. It has the kind of more longer-term implication stories, doesn't it, a lot of the time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're seeing the website now as a kind of almost an archive. We still put things up there as it happens, and we still do get spikes in traffic. We had an eclipse article which was basically just about how to view the eclipse safely, and you see a huge spike in traffic around a kind of global or national relevant event. We've had a couple of oddities like that where we've posted something and it just happens to have been topical and we've had a lot of traffic. But yeah, the things like the candidate interviews and things, they're there forevermore. And if somebody wants to, Will touched upon it briefly about people holding officials to account. If you want to, you can go back last year, the year before, and see what the people who have now been elected were saying they would do. And you could go and say, look, you said this on this day, you haven't done it. So there is that kind of the means there for people to go back and look at these things, which I think Facebook's timeline is getting better, but still, social media is what's happening now. I would consider myself someone who's fairly savvy with these things, and I still struggle to go back and find things more than a couple of months old. So yeah, the website definitely plays a part in terms of that.
Okay, I think unless there's anything else specifically, we'll wrap up because it's 2 o'clock, and just because it's 2 o'clock. So thanks very much for taking part, and everybody who's been and gone. All the links that people have been putting in the chat, I've been copying to the Showcase app, but Steph was saying she didn't think they'd ported over, so I will compile them into some kind of blog post with the video or something, so people can find it later.
Yeah, I can't see them in the Showcase, so maybe we could put them in the YouTube description once this is finished as well.
Yeah, that's a better place to put it, actually, you're right. Okay, great, fantastic. Thanks, Guy. Thanks, James. And,
thanks.
catch you later.
Cheers, bye-bye.
Bye. See you.